Goosebumps horrorland. Help! We have strange powers. R.L. Stine. 1. Sometimes being a twin totally rocks, and sometimes it's the pits. I hate all the jokes. People say, you look so much alike. How can I tell you apart? That's supposed to be funny, see? Because I'm a girl and my twin is a boy. Ha ha. Our parents didn't help us out. I mean, naming us Jillian and Jackson. That's too cute for words, right? I've been thinking when I get older, I may change my name to Adriana. Or do you think that's too snobby sounding? Well, I'm stuck with Jillian for now. But I don't let anyone call me Jilly or Jill. And I never wear the same color clothes as Jackson. I guess I'm more sensitive about the twin thing than my brother. He's the relaxed one in the Gerard family. Everything is cool with him. Mom says I think too much. It sounds like a compliment. But she doesn't mean it in a good way. She says if I were a superhero, I'd be Worry Woman. Jackson and I are into superheroes. We're saving up our allowances to go to the big comic book convention in San Diego next summer. But that's a whole other story. Jackson and I are 12. We both are tall and thin. We have wavy brown hair and dark, serious eyes. I'm on the swim team at school, and I like to play tennis, and I take horseback riding lessons on Saturdays. Jackson is into sports, too. Mainly, Madden football on his PlayStation 3. Dad says Jackson should get up off the couch and get more exercise. Jackson told him, I'll get a lot more exercise if you buy me a Wii. This argument goes on and on. Anyway, one good thing about being a twin is you always have someone to go to the movies with. One rainy night after dinner, Dad dropped us off at the Tenplex at the mall. We ran to the ticket window to make sure Butt Kicker 2 wasn't sold out. Butt Kicker is our favorite superhero. He started out as a member of the Mighty Mutant Club. But he was kicked out for being too tough. How cool is that? Jackson and I bought big buckets of buttered popcorn. Then we made our way down the aisle of the crowded theater. We like to sit very close to the screen. We don't like people to come between us and the movie. We sat down on the end of the third row. I stared up at the screen. Basketball players were leaping about a mile off the floor. It was a commercial for sneakers that could make you almost fly. Great seats, Jackson said, digging into his popcorn. I don't mind a stiff neck, do you? Of course not, I said. I accidentally bumped his arm with my elbow. A little popcorn spilled onto the floor. Hey, watch it! Jackson snapped. He twisted away from me. This is my new sweater. You'll get butter on it. Jackson, it's a black sweater, I said. The stains won't show. Jackson didn't reply. He was staring past me to the aisle. And he had a horrified look on his face. Oh, no, he moaned. I don't believe it. Oh, no. And that's when all our trouble began, on the day Jackson and I got our strange, new powers. 2. I turned and saw Nina and Artie Lerner squeezing into our row. It was my turn to let out a groan. Jackson and I can't stand those two kids. I wanted to pretend I didn't see them. But Nina was already waving to us. And Artie had a dopey, toothy grin on his face. They dropped into the seats next to Jackson. Funny meeting you here, Artie said. He giggled. That was his idea of a joke. These seats are too close, Nina complained. It's making my eyes hurt. What is this dumb film, anyway? Artie asked, wrinkling his thick black eyebrows. Is it like Batman or what? I took a deep breath. But Kicker could eat Batman for breakfast, I told him. Let me explain about Nina and Artie. They are twins, too. And they just moved to our school in September. We're in some of the same classes. And because they're twins and we're twins, Jackson and I were assigned to be like their school guides. You know. Show them the ropes. So we became their first friends at school. We really didn't want to be their friends. We quickly discovered they were both totally gross and disgusting. We didn't like them at all. But people were always putting us together. You know how there's one kid in class whose nose never stops running? Well, that is Artie Lerner. Artie and Nina both say they have sinus problems. But Artie is the worst. He's constantly blowing his nose into these disgusting, wet, wadded-up tissues. And when he eats in the lunchroom, snot drips onto his sandwich. Really? How gross is that? Artie is always giggling at things that aren't funny. And he thinks he's cool because he wears baggy, low-riding jeans and long, heavy metal rock group t-shirts. But no one is into that at our school. He looks like a little kid playing dress-up. They both have curly brown hair that looks greasy. And they walk kind of hunched over with their shoulders slumped. They look tense and worried all the time. The learners have high, whiny voices. Nina never stops complaining about her migraines and her sinuses and whatever. She stands too close when she talks to you. I mean, right in your face. And she always pokes you with one finger as she talks. She's always touching you, and grabbing you, and poking you. I guess you get the picture. The Lerner twins are no fun. Nina squirmed in her seat. It's kind of damp in this theater, she said. Very bad for my sinuses. Hope I don't get one of my attacks. I pretended I was totally into the commercials on the screen. Jackson had his head down, like he was studying his popcorn bucket. Yo, dude, Artie said. He is always calling everyone dude. Girls, too. Awesome sweater. I saw one just like it at Old Navy. Artie grabbed Jackson's sleeve to feel the sweater. Jackson let out a startled cry as Artie bumped the bucket from his hand. And a ton of butter-soaked popcorn came spilling out. My sweater! Jackson shouted. He frantically tried to brush the popcorn off. But he had 2 huge butter stains on the front. My new sweater! I don't believe it! I guess I was wrong about stains not showing on black sweaters. Artie shrugged. No biggie, he said. It doesn't look too bad. He brushed some popcorn kernels off Jackson's sleeve. It's totally ruined, Jackson said. It'll come right out in the wash, Artie said. He wiped his runny nose on the back of his hand. Then he dug into the bottom of the bucket, pulled out a handful of Jackson's popcorn, and shoved it into his mouth. Jackson may be the calm one in our family. But you can push him too far. And that was too far. Jackson let out a roar. He wrapped an arm around Artie's neck and began wrestling with him. The popcorn bucket rolled into the aisle, and a little girl tripped over it. She fell onto her knees and started to scream. Jackson pulled Artie out of his seat. The two of them tumbled into the aisle, wrestling, grabbing at each other, punching. Nina jumped to her feet and started shrieking. Don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. You'll kill him. Up on the screen, a little mouse was telling everyone to turn off their cell phones and be quiet as a mouse during the movie. A skinny middle-aged man in a black suit appeared from out of nowhere. He had some kind of badge hanging around his neck. He grabbed Jackson with one hand and Artie with the other. I'm the manager, he said. You 4, let's go. Quickly. You're out of here. All of you, you're under arrest. 3. He herded us up the aisle to the exit. People stared as we walked past. Behind us, I could hear the Butt Kicker theme song. The movie was starting. But we wouldn't see it. The manager pushed us through the lobby and out into the mall. You're not really arresting us, I said. I couldn't help it. My voice was kind of shaky. No, he replied. I just said that to get your attention. But you're out of here. I can't have fistfights in my movie theater. He gave us a nasty stare. Then he turned and stomped back into the theater. Jackson tugged at his sweater sleeve. The sweater was totally stretched out and stained. We took a few steps into the mall. I just wanted to get away from the Lerner twins. But, of course, they followed us. No biggie, Artie said, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. I hate superhero movies, anyway. Yeah, Nina agreed. They're too noisy. They always give me a migraine. I'd like to give her a migraine. I thought. Why do we always get stuck with these losers? Want to hang out or something? Artie asked. Maybe we could get some cinnamon buns over there. Yuck. Those are too sweet, Nina whined. They make my teeth hurt. Sorry. We've got to go, I said. I didn't bother to make an excuse. I just pulled Jackson away. I tugged him past a frozen yogurt store and a make-your-own panda bear shop. When the Lerner twins were out of sight, I let go. I slumped against a store window and sighed. I was looking forward to that movie for a month, Jackson groaned. And that jerk Artie ruined it. I pulled out my cell phone and checked the time. What are we going to do? We have 2 hours to kill before Mom and Dad come to pick us up. Hey, we're at the mall, Jackson said. How hard is it to kill time? Jackson and I started to walk. He stopped in front of the video game store and stared at some kind of battle game for a while. I went next door to check out some tennis rackets. We walked the whole first floor. Then we sat down and had cinnamon buns. Too sweet, Jackson said. He had icing smeared on his chin. I finished mine in 3 bites. Way too sweet. I agreed. We both laughed. Know what I'd do if I was a superhero? Jackson asked. He was gazing into a travel store with a snowy skiing photo in the window. I'd pick up both of those wimpy Lerner kids. I'd fly them to the North Pole and leave them on an ice floe with a hungry polar bear. I shook my head. Too good for them, I said. I'd use mind control powers and give them the brains of 1-year-olds. I laughed. Miss Hawking would have to change their diapers in class. We both laughed like lunatics. Jackson and I even have the same cackling laugh. A short while later, we walked outside to where we always meet Mom and Dad. The parking lot was wet, filled with puddles. It must have rained while we were inside the mall. Suddenly, Jackson gave me a hard shove and screamed, "Jillian, look out!" 4. I let out a cry as a wave of icy water splashed over me. I staggered back. Grabbed onto my brother. We both frantically shook water off. We were drenched. Wiping water from my eyes, I saw a big blue SUV roaring past. The huge car had sent a wave of rainwater over us. And as the car rolled past, I saw Nina and Artie in the back seat. They were shrugging and mouthing the word sorry over and over again out the window. I hugged myself. I was shivering. I really hate those kids, I muttered through gritted teeth. None of our friends can stand them either, Jackson said. He studied his new sweater. Totally soaked and ruined. He sighed. I can't believe they invited us to their birthday party. I can't believe Mom and Dad are making us go. I replied. I glanced around. Stores were closing. There were just a few cars left in the big lot, glistening with raindrops under the tall lights. Where are Mom and Dad? They're late. Probably watching a ball game and forgot about us, Jackson muttered. Mom and Dad are White Sox freaks. I wiped water off my forehead with my hand. Something caught my eye near the mall entrance. A small booth bathed in a purple glow. "Check that out," I said. Jackson followed me as I turned and walked over to it. "Cool," he said. He read the sign above the little booth out loud, "Madame Doom. A fortune teller's booth." It looked like the ticket taker's booth at the movie theater. The front was glass with a small window cut out of it. It was glass on 3 sides and it had no roof. Red and purple lights blinked on and off all around it. Behind the glass, a wooden figure sat in front of a red curtain. An old fortune teller. She was dressed in purple with a long purple scarf over her black wig. Her cheeks were bright red. Her eyes were black. The paint was cracked and one eyebrow was chipped away. She leaned toward the glass. It looked as if she was staring right at us. "Awesome," I said. "Let's find out our fortunes. Where do you put the money?" We searched till we found a slot on the side of the booth. Jackson found a quarter in his pocket. He slipped it into the slot. I heard a creaking sound. Slowly, the wooden figure began to move. Madame Doom blinked her eyes. Her head rolled back, then forward. One pink hand lowered heavily to her side. With a loud click, a small white card slid into the hand. Then slowly, very slowly, creaking loudly, she raised the card to us. I stuck my hand into the opening in the glass. I stretched my fingers as far as they could go. But I couldn't reach the card. "Her hand is stuck," I said. "It won't come up all the way." Jackson shoved me out of the way. "Let me try." He leaned into the booth. He stretched, reaching as far down as he could. I put my hands on his shoulders and gave him a little push. And zzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzz shook and danced as a powerful shock stung me, jolted me hard, and sent pain shooting out over my arms and legs. My eyes shut. I bit my tongue. 16. Jackson and I fell to our knees. The electric shock had stopped, but my whole body tingled in pain. I clenched my fists. I took breath after breath, opened my eyes, and saw the little white card flutter to the ground. I climbed shakily to my feet. My heart was still pounding wildly. "Are you okay?" I asked my brother. Jackson nodded. He stood up and stretched his arms over his head. "Wow. That was a bad shock," he said. "But I'm okay." My hand trembled as I picked up the card. "Jillian, read it," Jackson said. "What does it say?" I had to hold the card between both hands to stop it from shaking. The words on it were in tiny black letters. I read it to myself. Then I read it out loud to Jackson. "Welcome to Horrorland." 5. I said good morning to Mom and Dad and dropped into my seat at the kitchen table. "Here's a surprise," Mom said. She set a plate of waffles down in front of me. I blinked. "I knew you were going to make waffles," I said. "We usually just have toast or a Pop-Tart." "You smelled them?" Mom asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Huh?" I handed the card to him. He stared at it. Then he looked at me. "Horrorland? What is that? An amusement park or something?" I shrugged. "Beats me. What a loser fortune." A horn honked. I turned to see our car. Dad waved from behind the wheel. I still felt shaky as I climbed into the back seat. Tingly all over. "How was the movie?" Dad asked. "Awesome," Jackson said. "I can't wait to see it again." The next morning, I beat Jackson down to breakfast. We have a race every morning. First one into the kitchen gets 10 points. I don't know why we do it. Jackson hates to wake up. So far, I've won every morning. I think the score is about 10,000 to nothing. No, I said. I really knew it. Like a premonition or something. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Jackson staggered up to the table. He yawned loudly right in my face. He thinks that's funny. I got 10 points again, I said. He slumped into his chair at the other end of the table. I gazed down at the steaming hot waffles and sniffed. I love the smell of waffles in the morning. Jackson, would you pass the syrup? I asked. I heard a soft sip, and when I looked up from the waffles, the syrup bottle was right in front of me. How did you get it to me so fast? Did you throw it? I asked. Jackson had the strangest look on his face. He stared at the syrup bottle as if he'd never seen one before. Mom set Jackson's waffles in front of him. He reached for his fork and bumped it off the table. It clattered onto the kitchen floor. What a klutz, I muttered. I blinked. The fork was back on the table. My mouth dropped open. Am I seeing things? I asked him. He stared at the fork. Weird, he muttered. He shoveled a whole waffle into his mouth. Dad was frowning as he read the newspaper. Do you really think they might shut down the car factory? I asked. He finished reading something, then turned to me. Jillian, how did you know I was reading about the car factory? I don't know, I stammered. I turned to Mom. If you can't pick me up after school, it's no problem, I said. I can take the bus. She set her coffee cup down. How did you know I was thinking about that? Mom and Dad both stared at me. Are you reading our minds? Mom asked. I laughed. Maybe I am. Then I looked across the table and gasped. One of Jackson's waffles was floating in midair. 6. How did you do that? I asked my brother later. We were sitting in the back seat of the car, waiting for Dad. How did you make that waffle float? Jackson had a stunned look on his face. I can't explain it, he stammered. I stared at the waffle, and he lowered his voice to a frightened whisper. Jillian, something weird is going on. Dad climbed in behind the wheel. Jackson changed the subject. He started talking about the White Sox. I tuned out. I thought about breakfast. Something just wasn't right. At noon, I stepped into the lunch line at school. I called to Marcy and Annalie, my friends from the swim team, to save me a seat. And guess who jumped into the line ahead of me? Yes, it was Nina Lerner. You don't mind if I get in front of you, do you? Nina asked. I have low blood sugar. I have to eat something right away. No problem, I muttered. She picked up a soup bowl, started to raise the lid on the big soup pot, and then put it down. The soup is probably too spicy. It will upset my stomach. No, it won't, I said. It's just chicken soup. It's not spicy at all. Nina spun around. Her mouth dropped open. Excuse me? Jillian, I didn't say anything about the soup. I heard you, I said. Nina squinted hard at me. I love that skirt and vest, she said. I got them at this awesome shop at the mall, I told her. You know. The one next to Dogs and Things. The soup bowl fell out of her hand and crashed into pieces on the floor. Are you a witch or something? Nina cried. Are you reading my thoughts? I didn't say a word to you, Jillian. She spun away from me and carried her tray down the line. I stood there, staring after her, feeling strange. I had a whistling sound in my head. No. More like whispering. Dozens of soft voices. Wish I could have that dessert, I heard Nina say. But it might have corn syrup, and I'm allergic. I gasped. I realized Nina didn't say that out loud. She was too far away for me to hear her. What's happening to me? I asked myself. I really am reading her thoughts. I heard a scream from the other side of the lunchroom. I turned around and let out a cry. A chair floated in midair above a table. Jackson sat at the table with a couple of his friends. The three of them stared up at the floating chair. Kids screamed and pointed. My brother had the strangest expression on his face. The others were crying out in shock. But Jackson looked like he was thinking hard. Concentrating on the chair. Was Jackson making the chair float? I remembered the floating waffle that morning. I had to talk to my brother. We had to figure out what was going on. Two teachers hurried across the room. One of them grabbed the chair and pushed it back down to the floor. I've seen that trick on TV, a girl said. Did she say it or did I read her thoughts? I suddenly felt dizzy. Confused. I pressed my hands against my forehead. The bell rang. I set my tray down and hurried to class. I didn't have any lunch. But I wasn't hungry. My stomach felt tight as a knot. I couldn't shake off my dizziness. On my way to Miss Hawking's class, Brandon Meadows, a friend of Jackson's, passed by me. He gave me a shy wave. And I heard him say, "Wow. Jillian is looking totally hot today." I could feel my face grow warm. I knew Brandon didn't say it. He was only thinking it. I read his mind. I never knew he liked me, I muttered. I was desperate to talk to Jackson about what was happening. But class had already started. He sat on the other end of the row from me. Miss Hawking was telling everyone to settle down. I waved at Jackson and tried to get his attention. But he had his head buried in one of his textbooks. I read his thoughts. He was bummed because he did the wrong science pages last night. He hoped he wouldn't be called on. Could Jackson read my thoughts? I was desperate to ask him. Miss Hawking finally got everyone quiet. I hope you all did your homework, she said. At 2:30, I'm giving a surprise quiz on it. I glanced at the wall clock. It read 2:05. I turned to my brother. He had a sick look on his face. I could hear what he was thinking. I'm totally doomed. Take out your wildlife notebooks, Miss Hawking said. Let's see what you were able to find out about the manatee. We'll start with you, Annalie. Is it a fish or a mammal? I didn't hear Annalie's answer. I was scrambling in my backpack to find my notebook. Where was it? I pawed through everything. Then I remembered that Nina had borrowed it. And she'd never returned it. I hoped I could fake it. Miss Hawking gets very angry if we forget our notebooks. I glanced at the clock. Still 2:05? Now, tell me, Miss Hawking continued. In what kind of waters can we find the manatee? Nina? I didn't listen to Nina's answer. I turned and gazed down the road to my brother. He wasn't listening to the manatee discussion either. He was staring hard at the clock. 2:05. Jackson didn't move a muscle. Didn't blink. I tried to read his thoughts. But I couldn't. Why was he concentrating so hard? What on earth was he doing? 7. What other sea creatures are related to the manatee? Miss Hawking asked. The discussion had lasted at least half an hour. But the clock still read 2:05. The hands hadn't moved. Didn't anyone else notice? I kept my eyes on Jackson. He concentrated. I knew what he was doing. I knew he had stopped the clock so it wouldn't be 2:30. I tried to listen to the science discussion. Miss Hawking asked a question. Sea lions and walruses, I said. In the Arctic. Jillian, wait till I ask the question, she scolded me. I could feel myself blushing. Kids were staring at me. How did you know what I was going to ask? Miss Hawking demanded. I shrugged. Just took a guess, I said. Now more kids laughed at me. I jumped as the final bell rang. Oh, good heavens! Miss Hawking exclaimed. She glanced up at the wall clock. The clock must have stopped. How did you all get so lucky? No quiz today. See you tomorrow. Kids cheered. A few touched knuckles. Everyone packed up and started for the door. I ran over to Jackson. He was sweating. From all the hard concentrating, I guessed. He had a grin on his face. You did that right? I whispered. You stopped the clock? He laughed. Yeah. I did. And you made the chair float in the lunchroom? Yeah, it was easy, Jackson whispered. And before I came to class, I closed my locker just by thinking I wanted it closed. Believe it? It's totally awesome. I can read thoughts, I told him. For real. I can read your thoughts. His smile faded. No joke? What am I thinking about? A Snickers bar, I said. He staggered back. Oh, wow, Jillian. You're right. You really can read minds. We walked down the hall toward the front doors. How did this happen to us? I asked. He thought hard. The fortune teller, he said. The electrical shock we got from her booth? I'm kind of scared, I said. I feel so different. It's fun. But what's going to happen to us? Are we like superheroes now, Jackson? Or are we total freaks? 8. The next day, we had a soccer game in gym class. Mr. Bennett is our gym teacher. Everyone calls him Coach B. Coach B is young and tall and very hot. The girls in school all have crushes on him. We gathered around him as he started to choose up sides. But Artie interrupted. I can't play, Artie whined, rubbing the back of his neck. I have a runny nose and a stiff neck. Think I'd better sit this one out. Good, I thought. He and his sister are both total klutzes. Artie may be the worst soccer player in history. He's afraid to kick the ball. Afraid he might sprain his toes. Everyone plays, Coach B told him. But my neck dash, Artie said. Get some exercise, Coach B said. It'll loosen you up. Your neck will feel better. Grumbling and rubbing his neck, Artie trotted across the grass to join his team. I saw that one of his sneakers was untied. I was on the red team. Jackson was on the blue. It was a sunny, hot day. The grass on the soccer field shimmered under the bright sunlight. We all played hard and had fun. It felt good to run during the middle of the day. With about 10 minutes left in gym class, the game was tied 2-2. I moved the ball toward the goal. I could read the defender's mind. I knew she was going to zig left, so I zagged right. She spun around, startled, as I sped past her. Was that cheating? I don't know. I shouldn't have thought about it. I made a mistake. I passed the ball in Artie's direction. He stumbled over the ball, fell over it, and hit the ground with a loud oof. The ball squirted out right in front of a blue team player. He moved it down the field and kicked a goal. Now we were losing 2-3. Only a few minutes left in class. I saw Coach B checking his watch. Our last chance to score, but Artie had the ball. He dribbled it between his feet for a few steps. Then he pulled back his leg and gave it a hard kick. It was a powerful kick in the wrong direction. "Look out!" I shouted. Too late. The ball crashed into Jackson's stomach. He opened his mouth in a sick groan. His face turned purple and his eyes nearly goggled out of his head. Jackson grabbed his stomach and dropped to his knees, gasping and choking. "Oops. Sorry," Artie called. Coach B ran over to check Jackson out. But Jackson climbed to his feet and waved the teacher away. His face was still red, but he was breathing normally again. "Oh," I murmured. I could read my brother's thoughts. And they were all anger, anger, anger. He was desperate to pay Artie back. The game had stopped while everyone watched Jackson. The ball lay on the grass at the near sideline. I saw Jackson scowl at Artie. And then he lowered his eyes to the soccer ball and stared hard at it. "No!" I shouted. "Don't do it, Jackson." I went running toward him. Too late. I couldn't stop him. He sent the ball rocketing toward Artie's head. 9. Artie didn't see it coming. He bent down to tie his sneaker. The ball sailed over his head and bounced in the grass. I stepped up beside my brother. He was breathing hard. His forehead was drenched with sweat. But his anger was fading. "Jackson, that was a close call," I said. "Someone could have seen you." Luckily, none of the kids noticed, and Coach B had his back turned. "We've got to be careful with these new powers," I said. "No way could we explain to Coach B what you just did. And we don't want everyone to think we're freaks." "I'm sorry," Jackson said. Then he grinned. "Sorry I missed that jerk." Saturday morning, I needed my science notebook. And I remembered that Nina still hadn't returned it. It was a dark morning with storm clouds moving low in the sky. The air smelled like rain, heavy and thick. I pulled a hoodie over my t-shirt and started out the front door. "Back in a few minutes," I shouted to my parents. Jackson popped his head outside. "Jillian, where are you going?" "To the learners," I said. "I have to get my science notebook." "Wait. I'll go with you," Jackson said. I felt his forehead. "Sure you're feeling okay?" "Artie got a newie," Jackson said. "I want to check it out." He grabbed a jacket and followed me outside. "I've been thinking about what you said, Jilly." "Don't call me Jilly, Jackie," I said. I poked him hard with my elbow. "We have to be careful with these new powers," Jackson said. The newspaper sat at the bottom of the driveway. Jackson squinted hard at it and it went flying onto the porch. I laughed. "Yeah. I see you're being very careful," I said. "Don't want it to get wet," Jackson said. We started to trot along the sidewalk. It had rained the night before, and our shoes splashed in the puddles. The learners lived in a big old house 2 blocks away. At the corner, 2 little boys tossed their bikes onto the grass and started toward a house. "Watch this," Jackson said. He had an evil gleam in his eyes. I read his mind. "No, don't!" I cried. I grabbed his arm. But I couldn't stop him. He sent one of the bikes floating up off the grass, higher. Higher. The little boys screamed in shock. Jackson lowered the bike to the ground. The boys stared at the bike, both talking excitedly at once. "Just keep walking," Jackson said. "Don't even look at them." I shook my head. "I don't believe you," I muttered through my teeth. Do you really think this is all just a big joke? A superhero has to have some fun, he replied. We're not superheroes, I said. We don't know how long these powers will last or anything. We have to be careful, Jackson. We dash. I stopped talking because we had reached the learner house. It was a 3-story, green stucco house. The shutters were broken in front. The front lawn was tall and filled with weeds. I rang the bell. After a few seconds, Nina answered. Oh, hi, she said. Come in. We're busy planning our birthday party. Big whoop, I thought. I just came for my science notebook, I said. Oh. That, Nina said. She led us into the living room. There were big moving cartons everywhere. You can see we're still unpacking, Artie said, appearing from the back hallway. Hope Mom and Dad get it done by the party. Not much room to hang out. Nina sighed. We've been here a month. But they just haven't found time. And all the dust makes me sneeze. It's really bad for my sinuses. Where are your parents? I asked, glancing around. I saw a den on the other side of the living room. A big screen TV was on with some kind of Wii game on the screen. Shopping, Nina said. Getting stuff to make the birthday cake. We need a big cake, Artie said. We invited everyone in class. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I can't decide what kind, Nina said. I can't eat chocolate. It gives me a rash. So chocolate is out. Mom wanted to make a coconut cake. But Artie and I hate coconut. It gets stuck in our teeth. Too bad, I muttered. There was no place to sit down. The couch and chairs were covered with wrapped-up lamps and vases and other stuff. We can't stay, I said. Can I just have my science notebook? Nina stared at me. Her face went kind of pale. I read her thoughts. There was a big problem with the notebook. She disappeared for a few seconds, then returned with her head down. She handed me the notebook. I'm really sorry, she murmured. The notebook was soaked. A soggy mess. I couldn't even open it. I tripped, Nina said. It fell in a puddle. I'm really sorry, Jillian. I'm so clumsy. Yes, you are, I thought. I took really careful notes. I wanted to get an A in science. But now. Maybe you could dry it in the microwave, Nina said. Brilliant. I've got to go, I said. I spun around, looking for my brother. I saw him in the den with Artie. They both stood side by side, staring at the TV screen with game controllers in their hands. Move it this way, and it moves the fighter's hands, Artie was explaining. I took a few steps toward the den. Jackson, we've got to go, I said. He didn't hear me. He loved Wii games. He and Artie began playing a boxing game. Swinging their fists and dancing around like boxers. They were punching the air with their fists. And the boxers on the screen followed their moves. My brother was really into it. He started groaning with each punch that he threw. On the big TV screen, the two boxers were pounding each other. And then, Artie seemed to stumble. His punch went wide and he slammed his fist into my brother's jaw. Ow, wow! Jackson howled in pain. He grabbed his jaw and staggered back against the den wall. Accident! Accident! Artie cried, dropping his controller. I read his mind. It really was an accident. But Jackson let out an angry growl, like an animal. Rubbing his jaw, he moved toward Artie. I read my brother's thoughts. Enough is enough. That's what he was thinking. And then he thought, help me out, Jillian. Let's teach these learner twins a lesson. I gazed at my sopping wet notebook. And I began to feel as angry as Jackson. Okay, I said out loud. Let's do it. 10. Nina moved beside Artie. Was she trying to protect him? Jackson narrowed his eyes and stared at them both, concentrating his powers. I stared at them, too. Hey, Nina shouted. Her eyes moved from me to Jackson. Are you both freaking out? Why are you looking at us like that? What are you doing? Stop it! Artie cried. Stop staring at us like that. Are you crazy? You're giving me a migraine, Nina said. She started to rub her temples. But suddenly, her hands dropped to her sides. She gazed straight ahead, both arms hanging limply. Both of them froze. Like statues. Their faces went still. They stared straight ahead and didn't blink. I tried to read their thoughts. But their minds were totally blank. Jackson laughed. Awesome! That was so easy! Look at M! I totally froze them. A chill went down my back. They're not thinking or anything, I said. They've totally shut down. Jackson pumped a fist in the air. Yes! Yes! I grabbed his arm. Maybe we've gone too far. He pulled free. No way, Jillian. He stepped close to Nina and Artie. Maybe now you two will cut us some slack and stop being such wimpy, obnoxious pests, he said. He turned to me. Think they'll remember this? I don't know, I replied. I don't know what they'll remember. My voice broke. I don't like this, Jackson. I don't think we should have done this. Okay, he said softly. You're right. We'll unfreeze them, okay? We've scared them enough. He began to concentrate. The learner twins didn't move. They stared straight ahead. I had a sick feeling in my stomach. I couldn't even tell if they were breathing. Hurry up, I said. Concentrate harder. This is too creepy. My whole body tingled with fright. Why? Did we do this to these two kids? We hadn't even practiced our powers yet. We didn't know what we could do and what we couldn't. Jackson squinted at Nina and Artie. He clenched his jaw and concentrated his powers. I stared at them, too, trying to beam myself into their minds. I kept thinking the same words over and over, wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Jackson let out a long whoosh of air. He shut his eyes. It's not working, he stammered. The learner twins didn't move. Keep trying, I said. Please, Jackson, do it. Do it. We both concentrated on them again. I gritted my teeth so hard, my jaw ached. But no change. I stepped up to Nina and shouted in her ear. Wake up! Do you hear me? Wake up! No. She didn't blink. Not a muscle moved. Jackson and I grabbed the twins and shook them. We shook them hard, shouting for them to wake up and snap out of it. Nothing worked. I staggered back, choked with panic. What are we going to do? My voice came out in a terrified whisper. Jackson, what dash? I didn't finish. I heard a door slam. The sound made me jump. We're home, a cheerful voice called. I gasped. I stared in frozen horror at my brother. The twins' parents were back. 11. Panic rolled over me. I struggled to breathe. The learner twins stared blankly straight ahead. They didn't move. Their parents would be in the room in a few seconds. I grabbed Jackson's arm. Hurry! I cried in a harsh whisper. You've got to wake them up. He stepped up close to Nina and Artie. He squinted hard at them. He concentrated so hard, his face turned bright red. I didn't know if my powers could help. But I concentrated, too. Wake up! Wake up! I uttered a cry as they started to move. Artie let out a groan. His shoulders slumped. He blinked his eyes and took a staggering step forward. Nina let out a long whoosh of air, like a balloon deflating. Her head rolled around on her shoulders. She stared at me as if she didn't recognize me. Jillian? When did you get here? I was so happy, my legs were trembling. My heart pounded like a bass drum. Jackson, you did it. I cried. Did what? Nina demanded. Artie stared at the TV screen. Then he turned to Jackson. Did we finish our boxing match? Yeah, Jackson said. You won. You knocked me out. Their mom called from the back of the house. Artie? Nina? Come here and check out the birthday decorations we found at the mall. We've got to go, I said breathlessly. I grabbed Jackson and pulled him to the front door. Nina frowned at me. Don't you want to see the decorations? No, I said. I want it to be a surprise. Bye. Catch you guys later. They stared at my brother and me as we ran out the door. I left the soggy science notebook behind, but I didn't care. We were out of there. And the learner twins were no longer the living dead, or whatever we did to them. It had begun to rain, and it was coming down pretty hard. I raised my face to the sky. The cold raindrops felt soothing on my hot forehead. Jackson and I started to run, splashing up puddles. That was close, I said. Too close. We have to practice, Jackson said. We don't really know our powers. We have to figure out what we can do and what we can't do. We ran under some trees. Rain washed down on us like a waterfall. Should we tell Mom and Dad? I asked. Jackson shook his head. We'd better keep it a secret. Mom and Dad have that dinner party tomorrow night, I said. We could check out our powers then. Tomorrow night, Jackson repeated. Yes. Tomorrow night. We'll do it. 12. The next night, Jackson and I ate frozen pizza for dinner. Mom and Dad were in their room, getting dressed for the dinner party. Jackson leaned across the table and whispered to me, I've been trying to think up a good superhero name for myself. I laughed. How about the tomato sauce mutant? I whispered. He squinted at me. Huh? You've got tomato sauce all over your face, I said. He growled at me. Your name can be Fantastic Funny Woman. Ha ha. He plucked a piece of pepperoni off his pizza slice and flicked it at me. It landed on my lap. I picked it up and started to toss it back at him. But Dad walked into the kitchen. What are you two talking about? He asked. Jackson and I both answered at the same time. Pizza, I said. Superheroes, Jackson said. Dad squinted at us. He adjusted his tie. He hates ties. We made up a superhero called the Pizza Surfer, I said, thinking quickly. Kind of like the Silver Surfer. Only he travels on a giant pizza. I know. Very lame. But Dad wasn't really listening. He was searching for his car keys. I spotted them first. They had fallen onto the floor beneath the kitchen counter. Jackson saw them, too. He stared at them and made them float up onto the countertop. There they are on the counter, he shouted to Dad. Dad scratched his head. Weird. Don't know how I missed them. A few seconds later, Mom and Dad said goodnight and headed out to the car. Jackson and I watched them drive away. Jackson stuffed a whole slice of pizza into his mouth. Then he grabbed his windbreaker and started to the front door. MMMPH. Let's go, he said. We stepped out into the clear, cool night. The rain had finally stopped that afternoon. The ground was still wet and marshy. Puddles glowed from the pale quarter moon hanging low over the trees. We trotted to the small park on the next block. It was surrounded by tall hedges, so no one passing by could see us. The park had a playground for little kids and a picnic area with tables and benches. There were tennis courts behind the picnic area. They were surrounded by a high wire fence. The courts were empty because they didn't have lights. The perfect place to try out our new superpowers. I tried to open the gate. Then I saw the big silvery padlock and the chain. It's locked, I said. We can't go in. Jackson shoved me out of the way. No problem for Wonder Warrior, he exclaimed. He stared hard at the lock, gritting his teeth. I could see the muscles in his jaw flexing as he concentrated. The padlock popped open and fell to the ground. Way to go, Wonder Warrior. I cried, slapping Jackson on the back. I wanted to tell him that was the lamest superhero name I'd ever heard. But it didn't seem like the right time. I swung the gate open, and we stepped onto the court. I carefully latched the gate behind us and gazed around. Someone had taken the nets down, so there was plenty of room to run around. I'm kind of psyched, I said. Me, too, Jackson replied. Know what I want to do first? I want to see if we can fly. I laughed. Fly? Really? I never even thought about that. I know we have powers we haven't even thought about, Jackson said. I'd never seen him that intense before. He was always the laid-back, easygoing, whatever guy in the family. How do we test it? I said. Just raise our arms in the air and try to take off. We both raised our hands high above our heads. Then we bent our knees and leaped into the air. Our sneakers thudded right back down to the asphalt court. We need to get a running start, Jackson said. He leaned